Welcome to another episode of Dead Headspace. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined by my friend Brennan LaFaro. Say hello, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
Today, Eric could not join us, but she will be with us on the next episode. We are covering, it's bent, American Cannibal, an anthology about, cannibals. And it's edited by Rebecca Rowling. Anyone, please correct me if that's not how you say her last name. It's forwarded by Rat James White, and we are joined by a few of the contributors. Candace Nola, say hello, Candace.
Hello, hello.
And Jeff Strand, say hello, Jeff.
Hello.
Evie Knight, say hello.
Hello.
And Ronald Malfi, say hello, Ronald.
Hello, Ronald. Somebody had to do it.
Somebody had to do it.
Brennan, would you do us the honor of diving into the next section?
So, with the exception of Miss Nola, who has joined us on multiple occasions, we are honored to be joined by Jeff, Evie, and Ronald for the first time. We've never had any of you on before. So I'd love to go around real quick and just do a quick little introduction. Candace is a pro, so I'm going to throw it to her first. She can do the first introduction.
Why? You just said with the exception.
Yes, but
right.
You're a panelist today, so you get the panelist questions.
I'm Candace Nola. I don't know what else you want to know. I am an author. I run the Uncomfortably Dark website, and I was lucky enough to be a part of the amazing American Cannibal anthology, which contains my weird little story. Here I am.
Welcome, Candace.
Thanks.
Jeff, how about you?
I'm Jeff Strand. I've written about 50 books. I'm mostly known for mixing humor and horror, and I'm in American Cannibal with my story Y2K Feast.
Evie Knight.
Okay, so I too am an author. I have written a couple novels and some novellas, and then I have a story in this amazing anthology I'm so lucky to be a part of, called The Flanagan Cure.
And Ronald.
Yep, I am Ronald Malfi. I'm a novelist. I've written about 20 books, about the same number of novellas, and I've got a story in this anthology called Go at Throttle Up.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's dive right into the anthology. And Patrick mentioned that it is forwarded by Rat James White. He wrote this lovely introduction. Lovely might not be the right word, but he wrote this phenomenal introduction that talks about how cannibalism, how it fits into horror, the taboos, and its wrath. So he wrote about the sexual nature of it and every angle you could cover. What I'm curious about is, what are your opinions about how this fits into horror and why it's such an intriguing topic to write about? Evie Knight, can we go to you first?
Well, I think I think from just a general standpoint, the cannibalism is such the last taboo, right? It's there's been throughout time all kinds of taboos that eventually just become a thing, and we get over ourselves, and then it's okay. But cannibalism is probably something that I hope will never become a thing, and it's always sort of been that. Oh my gosh, serial killers are these horrible things and we're so fascinated by them, but the ones that sort of elevate above the group are the ones that also consume the flesh of their victims, right? Those are the ones that we know and we talk about and we're like really skeezy about. So I think that why wouldn't it be in horror? Like, why wouldn't it be a subject of horror? So it's such a great fun psychology to dive into.
Yeah, that's such a good point. The idea that this is not something, well, hopefully, that we're going to look at in 50 years' time and say, oh, remember when we were all against cannibalism? What were we thinking?
We're so weird. We've really grown evolutionarily. Like, we're so cool with it now.
Absolutely. Ron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's, just like Evie said, this is, I guess, the ultimate taboo. I think horror mines from a great many areas, and I think that the interesting thing with something like this is, every time not that I read a lot or watch a lot of cannibal movies or read a lot of cannibal stories, but the few that I've seen always seem to present it in such a kind of very avant-garde or artistic light. And the names of some of these movies are slipping through my head at this time, but I know they're done kind of very highbrow for some reason. And I look at these things as like almost an element of loftiness in horror, in the eating of other people. It always seems to be presented that way. There's very few, I'm sure there's movies and books about cannibals like eating people like in the desert, or stuff like that. But the ones that seem to come out really take sort of this really interesting artistic highbrow approach to these stories. Again, we're probably all thinking of the same movies as I'm saying this. I can't think of any of the titles. Jeff may know them, I think, but some of these, but I'm always impressed by. I think there was a movie called, was it Raw, that came out a few years ago. They're just very character driven, psychological stories that just happen to have that cannibalistic bend to it. So I'm always interested in how you can take a horror trope and portray it, depending on who the writer is or how they want to tell a story, portray it in a variety of ways. It could be comedic, it could be horrific, it could be beautiful, it could be devastating. And this one seems to, really, for something as taboo as Evie said, it seems to often take a highbrow approach. So I find that fascinating. I probably just totally went off the rails with what the answer to the question was, but that's what I've got.
we like that here.
Yeah, I think you got a point too. There's almost an unacknowledged like classism in it. Like I think of Hannibal Lecter the man is classy as hell, but he also eats faces. And then there is, a subsection of this type of literature, movies, whatever, where it is people living in the desert. It is your kind of implied Texas Chainsaw Massacre, your Hills Have Eyes, or even your remote desert island. And maybe I'm missing a huge subset of the genre, but it almost seems like there is no middle ground. You're classy, or you're living in a shack. Interesting take on it. Jeff, how about you?
There's no drive-through cannibalism restaurants. I think they're either you're hunting for your food or you go to a fine dining establishment.
Yeah, again, 50 years from now, we don't know, but
right. It could be a week from now. We'll see.
Wait, real quick, just to back on Ron. Is it you want us to call you Ron or Ronald?
That doesn't matter. You can call me Ron.
Okay, Ron brought up a film, Raw, just it's 2016 French-Belgian movie. I actually haven't heard of this before, and on the poster it says for the subtext it says, "What are you hungry for?" So it looks pretty neat.
I think one of the movies I was thinking of as I'm saying this is there a movie called Fresh? Is that what I'm thinking of? It's got a cannibalistic vibe to it, but it's all like I think people like selling people meat to the highest bidder or something like that. Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff like that. I just think I find it interesting that we go that way with it.
Yeah, Fresh 2022. Is that cover is kind of like a groovy.
Yes,
it's like
it's got like a Tarantino vibe to it.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna try and not interrupt Ron this time. And Jeff, now I will officially throw it to you.
Yeah, I've written a few cannibalism stories, and they're all dark comedies. And I enjoy cannibalism from the standpoint that it's as far as you can go and still be fun. I think there are other subject matter that goes further, is more disturbing, but I think cannibalism is as disturbing as you can get and still successfully present it as a comedy. My story Y2K Feast is, it's about a guy who thinks that, the world is going to end at Y2K, and this is going to be his opportunity to finally try human flesh in a situation where it's necessary. And so, I have purposely tried to avoid cannibalism because I will write, cannibalism story after cannibalism story because I think it works really well. And I've managed to find a bunch of different funny angles at the subject matter. But I think for me, it's just because it is as far as you can go without going to the point where people don't want to read it. So I think it works really well from a dark comedy perspective.
That's excellent. Yeah. It just reminded me of something I want to talk about a little bit later. So I'm making a note here. Candace, same question.
Same question. I don't remember what the question was
It's
actually,
been a
but
while. The question was, uh, why, the obvious one is how does cannibalism fit into horror? But, on
yeah.
top of that, why is it so intriguing to read about or write about?
Um, I think this kind of goes in line with what everyone else already said, but it's because one, it's something we're not supposed to do. You don't need each other. And I also think that there are a lot of us that like to play with the whole, but what if you had to? And how does it fit into horror? Well, it goes in line with, well, we're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to kill somebody and eat them. And even if they're already passed away and you eat them, it's still kind of like taboo and you're not supposed to do that. And what's wrong with you? And I think in the world that we like to write in, there is a lot we can do with that trope. I per I personally like to go with the what if you had to? Like, what if it came down to you or the person who was already dead or about to be dead? Do you die just to stick with that rule of, oh, we're not supposed to do that, that's forbidden? Or do you save yourself? What do you do? And that's kind of the approach that I used in the story that I wrote for the book. So,
Mm.
mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know what? That answer doesn't surprise me at all. Having read Bishop, having started The Breach, survival is a big theme in your work. So it doesn't surprise me at all that that would be kind of your interesting aspect to explore through,
Yeah.
this subgenre. Um, Patrick, I'm going to throw it to you so that I'm not just talking all day. You are muted.
My bad. Yeah, I talked to Rebecca earlier to just kind of see if she had anything to relay. And she talked about, it's super short, but how she came up with the idea for American Cannibal. She said she after many hours of drinking at AuthorCon last year, lots and lots of vodka, and then she recruited the dream team. That's about how it all came about. But she also wanted to share that she's a fan of every one of the contributors, all 20 writers. She has uh, books from all of them on her shelf. In most cases, more than one title. She selected the writers because each one is a master of his, her, their subgenre: satirical, feminist, psychological, literary, transgressive, splatter, the whole range. The anthology, she said, is getting great reviews. And she believes that the big contributing factors that everyone brought their A game, and together they made the collection a powerhouse. And she said, I can take credit for recruiting them, for compiling these stories, and for going 9 rounds weekly with Amazon, who fought her on selling the Dust Jacket hardcover from another printer for months. But the talent, the meat of American Cannibal is all theirs. Um, I would like it, and I know it's probably going to be a short response, but I would like it if you guys could like kind of tease us about what your stories are. Evie, I want to start with you because you're this isn't exclusive to your story, but it was gross in such a weird way that I would never think about. And I mean, I gotta imagine it has to do with experience you've had, not with doing that, but like in your field.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, it's tricky because if you don't want to spoil it, that's fine, totally understandable. But like, what were the pieces that culminated to go like, oh, that's gonna happen. The drinking of that will happen. Take it away any way you want.
Okay, so the idea for this story actually came up about I was in New Orleans with my friend. It was her birthday. So we were also there. See, I don't know, maybe alcohol is behind a lot of these stories. Like the whole anthology starts with a lot of booze. So yeah, we were drinking a lot, and just at first I was just trying to think of what era I wanted to do, and then of course it made sense that I would choose prohibition and alcohol, and then really just kind of trying to think about it's probably because I work in the medical field that I started thinking about alcohol as also a preservative. Like you get, the old fashioned sayings, oh, you got pickled. I got and then, thinking about all of the medical specimens in jars, and we didn't always have formaldehyde. So what did we use was alcohol. And so, how, if you took alcohol away, so, how bad could you make it? Like how desperate, and then people do desperate things. Addicts, recovering addicts especially, or ones who just can't get their fix. I mean, it becomes a desperation. And how so kind of on Candace's idea of how far would you go to save yourself, or feel like you were saving yourself. And so if you were in the medical field, you are surrounded by alcohol even when it's prohibited in other ways. So that's kind of where that whole thing started coming from.
And it had a big vibe of trading one addiction for another. And I wonder if that was something you consciously put in there.
Well, yeah, and I think that's again, that's what a lot of times we do, right? Even now when when we treat addiction, people who are trying to quit smoking, right? They tend to gain weight because they trade one addiction for another. They have to have that oral fixation. So drug addicts, same thing. We treat them with a different drug that then has street value now and is becoming a thing. So it's so easy if you have this addiction or you have an addictive personality to trade one for the other. And so it just seemed like playing with the psychology of that, why it's okay to not be addicted to this, but it's okay to trade that. I've healed myself, I've cured myself because now I'm just doing this. And I thought that was kind of a fun psychological thing to play around with.
I like how even it's like everyone, if you haven't experienced addiction in one form or another, whatever it is, there's so many options. Someone that you love that has, and I like how, at least what I've seen, like in the last few years, that the way that us writers are handling that isn't for the purpose of a joke or hyperbole with the bad guy. It's handled with, especially in this story, it's handled with some powerful. What's the best way to put this? Some powerful observations on the human condition and the human hearts. I quit drinking, so like it's not like a trigger for me, but like I'm just saying personally, I appreciated it. And I thought you did a good job. It's real easy to walk that line and to just like get silly with it. Not that your writing is silly, but
no, sorry.
I just wanted to point that out. It was really good, and that jar scene was super creepy.
Thank you.
Oh my god, yeah. Brandon.
So one thing that we should point out for anybody who is, doesn't know a ton about this anthology is that it's not just about cannibalism, but it kind of takes the idea of cannibalism throughout American history. So everybody on this panel and all the stories in the book all have a setting in United States history in time. So we'll definitely dive into why that setting and stuff. Now, Evie, you kind of covered why you picked that period of time. I'm curious, and I'm not asking you to talk more than you want to about your day job, but how much of writing a medical story in the 1920s was stuff that you kind of picked up through through experience versus how much research?
Yeah. A lot of it, I think, is kind of stuff I already knew. Like I'm fascinated by the history of medicine. So it's something that, as I trained in medicine, it was something I always went back to. I, in fact, considered even doing a fellowship in that for a while. It's something you can do and work in like the Library of Congress and stuff. And but it's just fascinating to me, the things that we've done very confidently, assuming that we were doing the right thing, even 50 years ago, we had women in preterm labor walking around. Well, maybe not 50 years ago, I'm like old, but maybe longer than that. But we had women walking around with IVs of alcohol. We gave alcohol to stop preterm labor. And so drunk women wondering about the labor ward, trying to keep them pregnant by putting alcohol in their IV. So it's fascinating to me, the crazy stuff that we did. And so a lot of it I kind of already knew, but some of it was just a matter of, hey, when did formaldehyde actually start being used in bottles and jars? And so little fun, but I can fall into that research so easily. It's so much fun, and I end up spending way more time than I should. But yeah, so it was a easy choice for me, I think.
Before we go to the next person, just real quick, Evie, I'm wondering if you've heard of The Butchering Art. It's by Lindsay Fitzgerald. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for those that are wondering what that is, on the cover, it's a picture of the Victorian era doctors. It's crazy to think that was like,
yeah,
that was like 2 or 3 human lives ago.
Right.
It's The Butchering Art. It's about Joseph Lister's his quest to transform the grisly world of Victorian medicine. So we're
fascinating.
Yeah, we're talking about before people even like they weren't never put to sleep on anything, right? Like that was your experience.
Yeah. You had doctors going and doing doing autopsies and didn't know no one knew to wash their hands, right? So they do an autopsy and then come back and do a delivery or surgery with, they just wipe their hands off, on their white coats and stuff. So yeah, it's insane the stuff that we did, and called it medicine and said we were healing people. So
shit.
Yeah, it's a great book. I read it. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Brennan, take us away.
I kind of want to throw it to Ron next, because your story really, I don't know if it hit home is the right term for me, but I'm gonna do a little of your job for you, because it focuses around the Challenger explosion in 1986, and it doesn't just focus on the event itself. The event itself is almost happening in the background with the rest of the story, the focus, and you have a teacher. And the reason it hit home for me is I had a science teacher in high school who was a finalist to be on that flight, and he ended up losing, for lack of better words, that spot to Krista McAuliffe. And I had him as a homeroom teacher for 4 years and a science teacher for 2 years. And he only talked about that once. And even as a 15 to 16-year-old kid, you could just see how that lingered. And that would have been 20 years before I had him as a teacher. And that just still lived in his mind, and you could tell. So the idea of kind of exploring what that could kind of psychologically do to a person was very interesting to me. So I'll throw it to you. Tell us a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start by saying Rebecca Rowland is a bit of a bully, because she asked me to be in this. I don't do a lot of short stories, and I don't do a lot of themed anthologies, because if I have an idea for something, I see where it fits, and it's usually not the other way around. So she said, so I finally agreed to do it. And then she goes, okay, well, the theme is cannibalism. And I said, all right, okay, here's our theme. And then she goes, also, it's got to be around a historic event. And I'm like, all right, so it's like 2 themes. This is, so she's a bully anyway. But no, I was like the kid in my story. I remember watching that in school when that happened. And, you mentioned how I take that Challenger explosions and kind of put it a little bit in the background of this story. The reason I did that is because I think that's how, most people who are around for that recall it. That's how we all participated in, as watching it from afar. So I wanted to do it that way. I've always there's always been, and I don't know if it's because I remember watching it as a kid, but there's always been a bit of a draw to that to me. I wrote an entire novel manuscript that kind of has that as a backdrop story, and never really did anything with it. But I find something about that is just very magnetic to me. So with this story, it was, I used that, and I had my, the whole story is really about this teacher who is dealing with some personal domestic issues with her husband, and simultaneously dealing with a kid in her class who's being bullied. And you could probably, I've heard from more than one person that my contribution to this anthology is the one cannibal story that arguably doesn't have cannibalism in it. But I'd say, maybe for the uninitiated, but it's there. It's just much like I put that kind of symbolic wall up between what's going on in my story and the distance that I put between that and the Challenger explosion itself. The subtext, I feel, was very important to mimic with the cannibalism aspect of this story. When I first started kicking around ideas for this thing, I'm like, look, what I can't do really is have the big twist ending be, oh, they're cannibals, because everybody knows that going in. So that's out the window. So so how do I tell this, and what do I want to say about it? And I just started looking at, the idea of the kind of symbolic cannibalism of an abusive, domineering spouse eating away at his partner. So that's sort of what the main storyline is about. But also that very literal kind of cannibalism where I have a boy bite another boy on the playground in school, and while that I guess arguably checks the box because he comes away chewing. There's the big hit really is towards the end when she drops him off at home, and I'm not going to give away the ending, but I wanted to kind of allude to there being more going on in this child's life that I don't necessarily feel the need to tell in the story, but an astute reader can kind of put two and two together and go, oh, here's really what's going on in this story. So everything, I'm just kind of showing like the tip of the iceberg stuff here on this one, and I wanted a lot of it to be unspoken. So I had to kind of walk a fine line and dance the dance to kind of keep it vague. But like I said, my idea and what I've seen in art for a lot of these cannibal stories is that sort of higher brow approach, for lack of a better term. And although I don't think this story does that, I wanted to try something a little bit different that I hadn't seen, which is to kind of relegate it to, if it's the most taboo thing, it's also very unspoken in the story as well. And I wanted to carry that theme through it. So that's kind of where I was coming from in writing it.
That's fucking smart.
You should have heard what the first idea I came up with was. It was awful.
Can we hear it?
What the first idea was? Yes, it was about. So I heard about this on the news. This was like based on a true story to a degree. I don't know all the details, but it was like some guy who put an ad out in like a want ads looking for someone who would be willing to have this guy eat him. And that I remember hearing that story. I don't know what the outcome was.
I
but that kind of
heard that too.
Yeah, so it stuck in my head. I'm like, all right, maybe I'd go that route and kind of tell that little weird relationship and see how that goes. But every time I sit down to write one of these things, it's like I could tell by the first sentence if this is going to stink or if I'm going to go with it. And that one stunk, so I kind of put it aside and went in a different direction. That would have been funnier, though, I think. But
yeah, like I mentioned, I like the kind of psychological like investigation of it, but I would also say we all know or knew a kid like Michael when we were in elementary school, the kid who would definitely bite you. And the idea of kind of exploring, well, why though? What's going on behind the scenes that would lead to that. And another part of what you said that I found interesting, but also like troubling is not the right word, but what it made me think of is Rebecca gathered 20 authors and said we're writing cannibalism stories. That's got to be intimidating, as there are 19 other people who are tackling American history through the lens of this exact subject. What the hell am I going to do to make sure that mine stands out and that it doesn't just kind of like track down those cliches, which is so when we throw it to Jeff and Candace, if you guys have anything to say on that, I'd love to hear that idea. Ron, you kind of said that you said, all right, I'm gonna use cannibalism as more symbolism rather than more of a literal sense. But you know what, Jeff, you already talked a little bit about your story, so I wonder, number one, do you have anything to add? And I would also say, did you know that you were going to be the closer, and did you approach it any differently because of that?
No, I didn't know that the stories were going to be done in chronological order. I picked Y2K just because I thought it was a fun, I remembered it clearly, and I thought there was good story possibility because it was something that was, you had years of build up to this event, which turned out to be nothing, whether it was nothing or the years of prep actually worked. Regardless, it was something that, oh man, we're 1 hour from Y2K, we're half an hour from Y2K. I worked at an insurance company at the time, and we had a full plan for, what happens if we come in on January 1st and the computers don't work? How do we continue to provide service to the customers? So there was just this long, build up for one moment. And so I thought it would be, I thought I could get a good story out of I'd read some articles about, some people were, looking forward to Y2K. It's like, we rely too much on technology. This is our chance to return to simpler times. We could learn actual skills instead of being on our phones all the time. That maybe Y2K is not such a bad thing. So I thought it would be, a good story from that perspective. And so my story, Y2K Feast, is about a family who, we've got the father's giving the lecture because midnight is fast approaching. And the father's, we've got plenty of food. We've got everything we need. We're going to get through this. And maybe we have to eat some human flesh, but it'll be okay. And the kids wait, what? Why would you go straight to human flesh? Why can't we hunt deer? Well, okay, we can hunt deer, but also, we need to be prepared to eat some human flesh. And the kid, but Dad, there's lots of possibilities before we get to that point. I know. We just want to have that in mind. And so he's one of the people who the clock strikes 12:01, nothing happens. It's like, wait a minute, that's not what was supposed to happen. So it's basically about a father holed up with his family who's very disappointed that Y2K didn't really turn out to be anything. And he had his heart set on, having a excuse to try human flesh. So the story sort of goes from there. But I didn't know that I was going to be the closer. And yeah, whenever you're in a themed anthology with something like cannibalism, you don't want, like Ron said, it can't be the twist ending and they're cannibals.
Yeah.
You have to come up with something that, if in my case, they've read 19 other cannibal stories before they got to mine. So you have to come up with something that is a twist. So I had to focus more on, the characters, the story, not so much a twist on human flesh, because, if it's like, it's vampire cannibals, someone else may have done vampire cannibal. It's a lot of times it can be really difficult with these sort of anthologies. And in this case, because it wasn't a horror comedy anthology, I figured, well, I at least have that. I may be one of the only ones that goes for dark comedy. But yeah, it's always something that weighs on you. I'm working on a story now for an anthology. I don't think they've announced it, so I'm not going to say what the theme is, but it's a extremely narrow theme. And it's going to be really difficult to make sure I come up with something that's not like the other 19 stories, because it is, a very, very narrow theme, which sometimes happens. And it is something that weighs on you. It's sort of like doing the gross out contest
At BizarroCon.
You have to make sure that if you're doing, a story about whatever, you have to make sure it's going to be different from the other 10 people who've chosen that particular gross element. So you have to focus more on characters and plot than the actual premise a lot of times.
Yeah. I think your story, but also you as an author, I think that was the perfect choice to put in. And I know you kind of like lucked into that because nobody was writing about an event after Y2K, but you got 19 stories that are just kind of running the gamut from, oh my God, to that's awful, to that's gross, to, oh my God, again. I mean, like we said, EVs is just like,
visceral.
Visceral. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Ron's is just surrounded by shadows, and yours is if you read the stories in order, which of course you do, because why else, you're not a psycho. It's a breath of fresh air at the end. And it's horrible, yeah, but it's that perfect balance of, my God, this is awful, and like, where's this guy's head at, with but I'm laughing out loud, and does that make me a bad person?
Yeah,
um yes, it does. Exactly. Thank you for giving me that blanket answer.
And of course, we start with Candace's, and that was so cool. Basically, it starts with before America was established, and then ends with Y2K. So I don't know if anyone else's mind went there to where I'm about to say, but it could kind of be, its own timeline, like, different dimensions that parallel our own. That's kind of how I viewed it with this anthology. Like, what if in that world? Because cannibalism, I would hope, is more rampant in this anthology than our real world, but I don't know. You never know. Evie's smiling. She's like, "Yes, it is." I am curious about something though. As far as having a theme for an anthology, this is really why I'm asking. This is really directed for younger people. Well, not younger people, but writers that are newer. Just something to think about. But and I'll start with Jeff on this one. With
Okay.
writing a with writing a specific theme to make sure it stands out not only from previous works in fiction in general, but of your table of content contributors. How does, in what way do you think that can contribute to you being a better writer in general, Jeff?
I think it forces you to, be really creative. I'm one of 20 cannibalism stories. So one, again, going back to what Ron said, you can't have it as a twist. It's got to be, you know, you pick up a book called American Cannibal, you know that Y2K Feast is about cannibalism to some extent. So you can't just do a generic, well, she picked up the hitchhiker and the hitchhiker was a cannibal. Okay, that kind of premise is gone. You have to do something with a little bit more depth, a little bit more inventiveness. So it's basically just a writing challenge to what am I going to do that I know is going to be different from 19 other people when I don't know what the other 19 people are doing. So we didn't coordinate. There wasn't a Zoom meeting with the 20 authors saying, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. Okay, well, that's off there. What are you going to do? You don't really know what the other authors are doing, and so you have to really come up with your most original, most inventive idea just to make sure that people aren't saying, well, Jeff's story is good, but Ron's story is pretty much the same thing. I'm not sure why they use both of those. So you want to make sure writing kind of in a vacuum, that you're coming up with a story that you don't think anyone else is going to do. So it does challenge you, and it's a good creative exercise.
Did you guys know each other was going to be in it? Did you did you get a list of the other contributors?
I knew some because she pitched me directly at AuthorCon. I was like, okay, I have these other people. You should do it too. And it's like, all right, fine. So I don't know that I knew the full roster of contributors, but I had a good idea of who was in. But that didn't, I didn't know what Candace was going to write. I didn't know what Evie was going to write. So,
Ron, what about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff said it. Going into something this focused, knowing 19 other people are doing the same kind of thing. The worst case scenario is that you're treading on the same ground someone else in that book did, and it becomes boring and tedious. And I would rather experiment with what I'm writing, even if it's not good, as long as it's different. I felt that was a better approach than treading familiar ground in the same book. So that's kind of how I looked at it. But I mean, Jeff said it. It forces you to flex those writer muscles, be more creative, and say, all right, look, instead of kind of phoning this in from where I think a story like this should go, I got to recognize that my peers are all coming to the table with stuff that's going to be in this same world. How do I make this stand out? And they're all thinking the same thing too. So I think that kind of upped everyone's game to a degree as well. But yeah, I mean, Jeff said it. It's just about understanding the parameters that you can't have that be the twist. You can't you got to be conscious that everybody's going to be thinking for that outside the box story, you know.
Absolutely. We'll go Evie and then Candace, and then Brennan, bring us into the next topic.
So obviously, yeah, what they said. But I'm thinking also as a sort of newer author on the scene, one thing that I do anytime, like not just themed, but also if I have an idea of something I want to write, it also forces me to kind of get out there and look for books or stories on that topic as well, just to see what other people are writing and like what's out there, you know, because I'd love to read every single thing and watch every film, but you know, we all can't do it. So but I think it helps you really sort of diversify your knowledge of the horror community of the other authors, because getting out there and sort of reading already what is out there, what can I do to make mine unique, or why is this, you know, trope, why is my story trope, why does it stand out, or what do I have to tell that somebody hasn't already done. And so when you get one like this, I think it's fun too, because then I really tend to get the idea, and then I go looking for people who've written something similar and read what everybody else has done, so that I know kind of where I am on that spectrum too. So I like it in that regard, because it really broadens my knowledge of our genre.
Candace.
Yeah, what everyone else said, obviously, but I don't really know that I have a lot to add to that, other than about a year ago, I didn't want to write anything that had a theme at all, because it intimidated me. And I was like, okay, now I have to figure out something specific that I have to write about. And I wasn't really used to having to do that. It was just whatever popped in mind was what I wrote. But I've learned in the years since then that I like it more now, because it helps narrow the field a little bit. My brain doesn't really have to go all over the place to come up with something. You can stick to just this one. But it's also a little bit of a stretch, because when you're doing an anthology like everyone else, it's okay, we're all doing the same theme. So what do I do with this? And how do I know that it's going to be something unique to the anthology itself? Because we're all doing the same theme. So I think, can it make you a stronger writer? Yeah, because it makes you kind of go outside of your comfort zone, and it kind of makes you really stretch whatever idea you originally had. You tend to kind of stretch it as much as you can to make sure it's original, it's unique, and it's not going, hopefully, not going to be the same as what anyone else wrote. So,
Right.
How creative can I be within a certain set of parameters? Yeah,
yeah.
I like that. Candace, a certain host who will remain nameless and hairless, forgot to throw it to you for your story. So could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Well, you're wearing a hat, so I don't know if you got hair under there, buddy.
Exactly
My
the
story. The Roanoke story. When I was approached about this at AuthorCon last year, this legit popped in my head the minute the question left her mouth. I've had the idea ever since.
Can I just
I
interrupt and say
never,
it's not fair how quick your brain works with this shit? I'm envious of that.
you know, it's the original story of the Roanoke event. The historical story has always been one that I've always kind of been intrigued by, even when I was a kid. And as soon as she approached me with this about, oh, I want it to be about cannibalism, and it has to be a historical event. That was the only word that popped in my head, and I never wavered from that. I told her right then, I'm like, I got Roanoke, and she was like, fantastic. And from that moment, I knew exactly how I was going to write it, why I was going to write it that way. And, I was just really thrilled with it because it was something that I had always been fascinated by. So I wrote the story from the point of view of a man from England who came over here to the New World with everyone else in hopes of, having a new life and discovering something new. And here they are stranded on this little inlet right off the coast, and their governor leaves, their ship leaves, their rations run out. They're left with one Indian scout that they are friendly with who has been helping them. And that is a historical fact. The Indian man who I used was actually from that tribe. That was his name. I did a lot of research from the story, not only into the event itself, but also with regards to the language that I used. I wanted it to read like somebody from the 1500s would have been speaking. The words that they used and everything, like I wanted it to feel like, oh, you really discovered this man's journal on the island, and this is what happened. And it was all written from his sole point of view as to how everything takes place. And then it comes down to survival. And there was a group of men that took it upon themselves to make that choice for the rest of them. Like, well, what of options? What of food? The the tribe that's helping us is doing a little bit, but it's a cold winter. They're running out of food, and we have people dying around us left and right because they're sick, they're ill, they're freezing, they're weak. What do we do? Do we all die? Do we save who we can? So I kind of took it there with the whole survival thing. And of course, this one man figures out what happens, and the rest just kind of unfolds throughout his journal. So
Excellent. Thank you, Candace.
sure.
So to my mind, if I pick up an anthology and it has Candace Nola, Jeff Strand, Evie Knight, and Ronald Malfi, it is worth the price of admission. But there's a lot of other really, really great people in here as well. And I won't read all of them, but there's a really excellent Kennedy story from Brian Asman. V. Castro covers the gold rush and kind of combines that, sex and cannibalism aspect we were talking about earlier. Owl Going Back, C.V. Hunt, Gwendolyn Keist, Clay McLeod Chapman, Elizabeth Massey, Bridget Nelson has an awesome story in here. And, that's like just over half of the contributors. Cause like I said, there's 20, it's a star-studded lineup. Now, Patrick, I have somewhere I'd like to take us away from the anthology, unless you have anywhere else you'd like to go with it.
The only thing that relates to this is that because I was talking to Elizabeth Massey earlier this morning, she wanted everyone to say I can't talk. She wanted to say hi to everyone, and she's sorry she can't be here. That's it.
Well, hi, Elizabeth.
So having talked about eating people for an hour, I want to send it around one more time and give you all an opportunity to plug anything that you have recently released, anything that you have about to come out that you'd like people to check out. Evie, can we talk to you first?
Well, so I have another anthology coming out that I'm in at the end of the month. I'm trying like desperately to finish this novel that hopefully I will finish soon. So all I can plug right now are my shorts. But I have a short story with Sinister Smile Press in Just a Girl anthology, which is kind of like badass women of horror, which I really had a good time with because I wanted to try, like, I never really dove into any kind of like monster stuff, and I really was into like cryptids and monster stuff. And I grew up in the town where they filmed Mothman Prophecies, not the town that it happened. Obviously, that was West Virginia, but my little town apparently looked very similar to 1960s West Virginia. So that's where they filmed it. And I know it was a crappy film, but it was still pretty cool. So I've always, like, the Mothman was always a sort of a thing for me. And then and just kind of playing around with gender roles and maybe like writing a Mothman origin story. So that is mine, is a Mothman origin tale coming out in the end of this month. I believe it's the 31st. So
Excellent. Jeff, how about you?
My latest book is Demonic, which is a action-packed, gory horror comedy. Upcoming, it'll be out just a few days after this episode drops, is I wrote the novelization of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is every bit as stupid as you would hope.
Jeff, can you hold that up again? I'll take a screenshot of it. Sorry, I'm a little slow. All right. Perfect.
So I feel like the best novelizations come out 45 years after the original film. So.
Excellent.
Jeff, that is so cool too, by the way, man. When I saw you were doing that, I thought that was the best fucking thing. That's awesome.
And then your comment about you made a tweet, I think yesterday. You said that you could you would be up for doing the novelization of Cocaine Bear, which I saw like 2 weeks ago, and that was such a fun. I don't get to go to the movies often. That was a fun movie to watch, and I could see you doing that novelization and making it somehow more insane.
Yep. Yeah, I would love to do a Cocaine Bear. I don't know if anyone is going to contact me for that, but I'm available.
It's out there now.
Get in touch with Elizabeth Banks. That would be cool. We don't have her contact, so I'm going to shut up. Go ahead.
Candace, upcoming or recently released?
Upcoming stuff. I also have a short story in the Just a Girl and the with Evie. That is supposed to be out in time for Author Con, from what I know. I also have a rather short story coming out in a couple of days on the Godless platform, The Unicorn Killer. A lot of fun with that one. It's not meant to be scary or serious at all. It's dark, but I think in a fun way. I hope. I may not have nailed it, but I think it's good.
The cover's awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it is. The sequel to the Werebear story is coming out next month that Patrick has right behind his head back there. Bishop. It has a nice continuation of the storyline. I don't want to say much more than that. I took it somewhere that I don't think a lot of people are going to be prepared for, and they're either going to love it or they're going to crucify me. So it'll be fun to see what happens.
That's the best kind of story.
Yeah.
We should point out that the cover for American Cannibal is by none other than Lynn Hansen. And she, not saying this because you're here, Jeff, she's one of the best. She's one of my favorites. I agree. And it scares a care. She was one of the first people I met, and I got to give her a big hug and get a picture with her and buy one of her pieces of art. She's so good. She does a lot.
Was the first thing to generate buzz on this anthology. When people saw that, it was wow.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
I mean, it's pretty clear, but like covers sell books, and sometimes they don't. And there's some really good books that have shitty covers, and they don't get the attention because of that. I'm thinking of some writer, like on the craft of writing books, that they're really, really good, but the covers just look super cheap, so you wouldn't know it. It's worth putting that out there, for whoever's listening that might be on the fence. I don't know. You never know who's listening.
Ron, anything you would like to promote?
Yeah, sure. So my most recent books are my novel Black Mouth and my book Ghost Written. They both came out last year. So if you're looking for, any new readers looking to pick up my most recent books, that would be them. And then I've got a new book coming out in July, which is a collection of 5 novellas. 4 of them are reprints from the old Dark Fuse novella days. And then I added a new novella that's never been published before to that collection. So I'm excited about that. And Jeff, if you want to put me in touch with your publisher for Killer Tomato, I've always wanted to do like a really dense, dark, almost Russian novel version of Weekend at Bernie's. So I'm ready to do that.
That would be in Psychopocalypse.
Awesome. Oh yeah, like it's just so dark and dreary and like Crime and Punishment, but it's Weekend at Bernie's.
I am so intrigued by that.
I want to ask what that's about, but no, don't talk about it. Oh my God, make that happen. Seriously, is that a joke? Or are you really gonna?
No, I'm serious. I want to do that.
Okay, because sometimes people talk about stories and they're like, I wouldn't write that.
I had thought about that before, and then when I saw that Jeff was doing this, I had a conversation with a filmmaker buddy of mine, Kevin Kangas. We get together periodically and have beers and talk about ridiculous stuff. And I'm like, "Do you see that Strand's putting?" I said, "That totally reinvigorated me on this dark Weekend at Bernie's twist." I said, "But I'm so lazy. I don't know." But yes, I always thought that'd be funny.
Patrick, do you want to kind of take us to wrap up?
Yeah. Would you guys mind talking about what you're currently reading, and then we can stop bugging you with so many questions.
Currently reading.
Yeah, we'll start with you, Ron. What are you currently reading?
I'm in the middle of 2 books. One is Some Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman. I think it comes out sometime this year. So I got to read that and get a blurb out to him. And then I'm also doing the same for Philip Fracasse's upcoming 100,000 word short story collection, which is fantastic. Both those guys are awesome. I love their work, and it's a joy to be able to read this stuff ahead of time. So that's what I'm into right now.
Yeah, they're both they both do a hell of a job.
They're fantastic.
Candace, what are you currently reading?
That was on mute. I am reading The Massacre at Yellow Hill by C.S. Humble, which is coming out from Cemetery Dance. It's sort of a weird Western story. It's a lot of fun. So
excellent. Sorry, I thought there was more. I know that you read a lot, so I thought there was going to be more.
I didn't want to give away much, but
okay. Evie Knight, what are you currently reading?
Okay,
I don't know why I just said your full name. Evie, what are you currently reading?
That's okay. So a reminder that a lot of times when I'm getting into something, I'll start like reading lots of research. So I just finished The Killer Across the Table, John E. Douglas from like the Mindhunter guy, just talking about the psychology of serial killers. And then fictionally, I read this one called All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. I had to look her up. Sorry, that's why. About a couple whose child goes missing and just the horror of that. So I'm not, just like some unknown, unusual things. But yeah, that's what I've been reading.
Awesome. Jeff, what are you currently reading?
I just started by Robert Essig, Baby Fights, about basically the equivalent of cockfights, but for babies. They make babies fight to the death. So
as they should.
I feel like that's a book you would write, but that's also okay. Man, threw me off. Brennan, what are you currently reading?
Can't follow that.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
I am reading. I just started 5 Decembers by James Kestrel. And I'm still pretty early on into it, but it's wild because it's got that kind of like Raymond Carver, very bare bones prose, back and forth dialogue that just like, only takes up like just over an inch of the left margin, but like just propels the story. But it's also like 500 pages. You pick up a book like this and typically it's a slim little thing. but it does have that throwback feel to it, and I'm enjoying it so far. Patrick, how about you?
I just finished American Cannibal, and let's see, I actually get to check my Goodreads because I juggle a few books at one time. But and I also
You
just
gave it two
finished.
stars. That's terrible.
No, no, this is really a 5 out of 5. I'm currently reading Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane. It's his upcoming book, and it is about something that Brennan and I are very familiar with. The mobsters of Massachusetts in the 70s. Not that we lived during that time, but it's talked about still even today. Except it's all fictional characters, not Whitey Bulger and all them. And I actually just finished Shutter Island by him 2 days ago. I never read it before, and until then, it was really, really good. I like the movie, so finally read the book. Um, Final thoughts. Oh, actually, where can people follow you? We'll start with Evie.
You look evnightauthor.com. I have links to all my social media, and they're almost always EV Night Author of in some variety, whatever I case. So if you just go to evnightauthor.com, the whole list is there. And I'm on like all of them: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Excellent. Candace, where can people follow you?
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, uncomfortably.com. And if you want to pull up the link tree, it's just link tree with Nola at the end, and that will give you links to all of my stuff.
Excellent. Jeff, where can people follow you?
jeffstrand.com.
And you, Ron, where can people follow you?
At ronaldmalfi.com, all the social media platforms. And if you get bored with reading and want to listen to music, I also am in a rock band, and that's veerband.net. So I got all the plugs in.
Excellent. Brendan, where can people follow you?
BrennanLaFaro.com has everything you need.
You can follow me on Twitter at PRMcDonough, or if you want to follow the show, Dead Headspace on any platform. We'll do final thoughts and then close out for the episode. So, final thoughts, Jeff Strand.
You should purchase American Cannibal, available from all fine book retailers.
Candace Nola.
What Jeff just said. Just closed it for everybody.
This is Evie Knight.
Yes, what Jeff said, because I think anytime you find a really cool anthology, the best thing to do then is just go down that table of contest and start looking up those authors and buying their books, and finding out more about what they do. So.
Yeah. Ronald Malfi.
Do not respond to Facebook messages from Rebecca Rowland.
Brennan LaFaro.
What Jeff said, mostly because peer pressure at this point. But no, it's a great anthology. Lot of talented people writing killer stories, and thank you to the four of you for coming on. Candace, like I said, has been on before. Jeff, Evie, Ronald, I loved having you on this time. We'd love to get you back for solo episodes. All of you, next time you have something to promote, reach out and we'll make it happen. Mm-hmm. Patrick.
I just echo what Brent says. We've wanted you guys on for some time now, so it's really cool that we could do that for American Cannibal. It's a great anthology. I mean, great anthologies are not always super easy to get. This certainly does a good job. Rebecca did a very good job with curating. You guys were the meat of it, and we got to, as readers, devour it. Cannibal joke. Okay. As always, you got many choices in podcasts. Thank you for picking us.